Welcome to the Indian Journal of Law and Public Policy podcast.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the second season of the IGLPP podcast. I'm your host, Pranav Tawar, consulting editor at IGLPP. Here we discuss major happenings of the legal and policy field. Today, for the third episode, we have two very special guests, Mr. Sagar Singham Sethi, adjunct professor at Center for Aerospace and Defense Laws, Nalsar, Hyderabad. And the second guest is Mr. Syed Tamzeed Ahmed, who is aviation lawyer at Sareen and Company and also president at IGLPP. Thank you both for taking out time, and I welcome you to the show.
Thank you, Pranav. Thank you, Pranav.
Starting with Sagar sir. Sir, in general or layman parlance, this transport policy is a relatively less known field. As an introduction, if you can just explain it to our listeners and other important aspects associated with transport policy.
Absolutely. Once again, thank you, Pranav, and to the IGLPP team for giving me this opportunity. Just to put a caveat, so the views shared here are personal, but also at the same time, I would also flag that I also represent the Aerospace and Aviation Lawyers Association of India, which is based, of course, in Hyderabad. I am the founder and the managing director of that association, which we started recently. So with that brief intro, or in addition to what you said, Pranav, let me also share a few introductory remarks. So transport is a key sector for any economy. It is, as they say, the lifeline or the bloodline for the economy. Without transport, at least this is what I have seen over the last 15 to 16 years that I have been working closely in this sector, is that there is a close nexus in terms of what transport sector offers to various other sectors, let's say agriculture, pharma, manufacturing, tourism. So there is also not just a direct impact, but also it acts as a support sector. Okay. And with the recent technology advancements, whether it's new innovation or a lot of research being done in the transport sector, and there is, of course, the changing consumer demands or preferences, as we may also say, there is a lot of disruption taking place within the transport sector. Of course, we see that as a general phenomenon that is happening across all sectors, but specifically in the transport sector, we see that much more in terms of advancements in technology or some of the usage of new tools that are coming out due to new innovations. What this also means is, as you probably know, and most of the listeners would know, transport is a highly or heavily regulated sector where the margins are very low and the competition is very high. And I think it is important to say that the role of lawyers or policy experts with a specialization or with some nexus to transport experience is something that is really sought after in the current times. With new companies, whether you talk about the Ubers in the mobility sector or in the freight sector, you could talk about Flipkart or Amazon. There is a lot of new companies coming up with innovative technologies, and the businesses need clarity in terms of what this whole transport vision is going to be about. So with those introductory remarks, I would say that it's a key sector, and the focus of the government as well and of the private and public sector dealing with transportation is something that is only going to grow much further. Having said that, I would just try to define, at least in my view, how transport sector could be segregated. So you have basically three segments. One is the mobility, which is mostly for passengers. And then you have freight, which is the goods. And then the third element is the logistics. So this is more in terms of warehousing, where you put your inventory or your stock. And of course, all these three segments are related or applicable to all your modes of transport, whether it's air, rail, road, maritime, and even space sector. Okay, so when we talk about transport, at least the way I see transport as such, is that all these different modes of transport, they have a role to play. Okay, so that's how I would define them in terms of the segments. And when we talk about law or policy specifically, what does transport policy mean, or how, what are the areas that fall under transport policy? I'll quickly give you some examples. Let's say you talk about urban mobility as a policy. You talk about drone policy. You could talk about space policy. And recently with the Indian government also talking about space, but also about logistics policy. Okay, and you have this whole environment policy where the focus is on transport decarbonization, that is coming from, or at least the CO2 footprint of the transport sector. You also have the taxation and the customs policy issues as well, and you also have competition policy, because with all kind of state aid that is given to a number of players, operators in the market, it's also a key dimension or policy aspect that needs to be looked into. And then one last element could be the innovation and tech policy. So what I'm trying to tell you is that transport, again, has a number of branches. Maybe if you see transport as one sector, it has links to all these different policies, not specific to transport itself, but also it could be linked with other with other realms of law and policy. And it's important, at least for future lawyers or policy experts, they should not see transport sector like a silo. They should not think, oh, I'm just probably going to be an expert in aviation, or I'm going to be an expert in space. But if you can connect, and that would be my advice, being in the sector as well over the years, is that you connect your specialization, whether it's aviation or space or whatever specialization within transport, if you decide to take. I suppose you should also connect it very well with the other legal realms of other legal realms that are available. And then one last point is the role of the transactional lawyers, regulatory lawyers, and policy experts and compliance specialists in the transport sector is growing. When I say growing, it's like an understatement. Over the period, I have seen that the reliance on policy, especially policy experts, has grown because again, it's a highly regulated sector, and any costs or administrative burdens, or to reduce the administrative burdens, will definitely help the businesses, and therefore policy and legal experts are there to create that clarity and certainty for the business, and of course steer policy discussions that could help the overall sector as well. So therefore, there's a huge role for legal and policy experts within the transport space. And of course, the importance of transport will remain and continue to play an important role in the economy.
You have been in this field very recently for last 2-3 years. So what has been your experience of being in this field, and what are the prospects for new lawyers or policy enthusiasts? Because I've seen your posts on LinkedIn and etc., where you have mentioned your interactions with the government and different businesses in this field, especially aviation law. So what was that like, your personal experiences? And I would like Sagar sir to also respond to it after you.
Well, thank you for the questions. I must say one thing, that I have been working in this field since May 2018. And during that time, I have been, when I was with Boeing, I have met people from the European Union side and now the Indian side. One thing which I have seen recently in the past is that the government is always willing to help you. So I'll give you an example in which a case in which we were doing, which involved basically a kind of a conflict between India's Cape Town Convention, which is an international law on aircraft financing, conflict between India's Cape Town Convention obligations and the domestic law of India under India's financial acts. Now, what we have seen that the ministry or the DGCA went a step further and ensured that the business should not face any problem because of incoherence in domestic laws. That is a positive aspect which I have seen, if I say. Now, the negative aspect which I would say is always is that in India there's a dire need to align the laws. So when I say align, there has to be alignment of laws, which means you have a right, say in certain act, and then there's a hindrance which you are going to face in under act. So for a business, that becomes a cost. Because if you go to an aviation lawyer, he will say, yes, you can do that. And then tomorrow you go to a banking lawyer, he will say, no, no, for a banking perspective, it's illegal. And then you go to a trade lawyer, he'll say, no, for a trade perspective, it's illegal. So my entire point here is this: something which is very important and which is missing is the alignment of laws. And until you align the laws, it is something that a business can never make true progress in that regard. That is my basic point. That said, I still believe that the India has a huge potential for lawyers in this field because India is a big country. We have a population of nearly 1.38 billion people, and you need something to move this big amount of population, and that cannot be done solely by the railways, because what I feel is the problem with India was, since for many decades, that the railway had become the de facto mode of transport, and that is the reason we see that railway was suffering under so much of stress. That can be getting a ticket in railway, Indian railways, is a big deal, by the way, right? And if you discuss these things with certain people from foreign, and they say, how is it such a big deal? But that is the entire point. So now gradually what we are seeing is that the shift in aviation is going to group B cities. So from group A cities, they are going to group B cities. And that is, I believe, it is here that we will see more policy alignment. We'll see more compliance issues, and when you have more aircraft, when you have more traveling, you will also have more dedication. So I believe in that regard, yes, we'll have more work for lawyers coming in the coming decades or years. But yeah, I mean, due to COVID-19, I believe what we were pre-March 2020, it will take at least 5 or 6 years from now to go back to that level. So yeah, that would be my response. And I think Sagar sir would agree with that.
Agree. And but I will also add something, Pranav and Tamzid, maybe in a, probably in a different phrase. I think over the years we all have been working in silos, whether it's inside the corporate structure or within the government. And also, when I refer to
Mhm.
silos, it is also the specific modes of transport. There has not been much of coherence, and that's probably what Tamzid is also saying. So, when we talk about transport policy or a vision for the government of India should look like, is a collaborative effort or a collective effort of each and every mode of transport helping each other, to build that efficiency. Because for now, what we have seen over the years is that if there is the rail sector, of course, there is a policy push for the rail sector, and then the aviation sector came in. But this all has been working in silos, and what we as legal and policy experts especially should bring in is that convergence of both the business and the government ideas together and come out of those silos to build a vision where any of these innovative solutions or whatever new technologies that are being adopted, could really become handy across the board. I think to me that is probably where the success of this sector will also rely on. Once we are able to work together as a sector, as a transport sector, with all these modes of transport coming together. And this is where the collaboration between business and government is also getting more and more, intertwined. And probably that's your question as well. What is our role? And I think our role is again to steer some of those discussions, taking the business interests forward, but at the same time also trying to see the win-win situation for the government as well, or for the overall actors in that whole chain.
Sagar sir, talking about more interaction between business and the government, we generally see a lack of expertise on the government side in India. Now we have Niti Aayog and some other think tanks coming up and government collaborating with them on such policies. What is your experience when, if we can can we compare it with the European way of functioning within India on the transport policy? Do you feel there is much more liberalism or privatization on transport policy in Europe as comparison to India, which is actually causing India to go setback, or these silos being created within India?
I would not say that. I think it's an evolution. We are, we have seen the potential of what this sector brings. I think once you have recognized, let's say, transport as a sector that is contributing to the overall GDP of the country, automatically your all your interests are also going to be going in that direction. And I think to some extent, transport is recognized as one of the vital sectors. And like you will see aviation and space sector, rail sector, these are all recognized now as strategic sectors as well. Okay, so with having that in mind, if you have to compare it with Europe or with the US, again, liberalization and privatization also happened over a period of time in these continents. Okay, so it has not happened overnight. So from that standpoint, I'm sure that the Indian government as well as the private and public sector within the transportation network, let's say, is also going to evolve, and I think they will break out of these silos in near future. But of course, there's a lot of learnings, and the good thing is, I think India should look at Europe as well as US in terms of seeing how how the sector has been liberalized and privatized, and what are the good or the bad things, I would say. But per se, I would not say that we are lagging behind or anything. Of course, there are a lot of things if you really want to complain. But I think Niti Aayog or organizations like those or similar organizations have been playing an important role, whether it's IATA or FICCI, even the fact that we have started this whole aerospace and aviation lawyers association in India is to be a voice of the transportation sector. And this is where we also would like to play a role and bring some of our recommendations to the government of India. So I think we are slowly evolving, and I believe that some of the experiences that Europe had and US had would definitely be sought after in India as well.
Sagar sir, one of the things that every business sector faces is the general perception of it. And talking about Europe as such, there is one very interesting scenario which has come out where there has been an increasing support for conditional response to transport industry, demand, especially in the aviation sector. Like if I give an instance that some campaigners like Greenpeace or Flight Free have asked or called for the government to take equity stakes in airlines rather than handling out cash or loans to ensure social security to workers. And this has specifically come in light of coronavirus bailout packages. So they are saying that if you want to give them bailout packages, then the government needs to take some equity stakes in them. So do you feel such conditional packages can corner the industry more into the helplessness?
I would say, definitely there is going to be a distortion in the market. And of course, when we talk about level playing field, probably that's also going to get disturbed. But having said that, if that's going to impact innovation as such, I am not really sure. Because innovation, I believe, is going to be the food, innovation is going to be the new sustenance of this sector. If the sector is not innovative, if the sector is not being creative, especially post-COVID, I think what you said, like this sector is going to face or probably even perish, is very possible. despite all the hit the sector has taken today, whether it's the financial hit, of course, or any kind of other disturbances the sector is going through. Because when I say disturbances, it's not going to happen that tomorrow people are going to get onto an aircraft or a bus or rail wagon, because there are health and safety reasons for each of them to get back into any of these modes of transport. So my point is, innovation is key, and probably it will remain the kind of a big hope for the sector. But I think the bigger issue here is, how are these operators or how are these companies going to raise the required money, or how are these companies going to invest when there is no means of income at all? I think, to me, that's the question, because innovation will be a focus, but if there is no investment coming, then what is it that we're going to innovate? And this is where I think the support mechanism that each and every government is putting in place is really important. Okay. And of course, these are all conditional support mechanisms, and that should be the case as well, because there's nothing in the world as free, not anymore, at least as far as I know. It has never been the case. But again, conditional support itself is not bad, because you need to keep the industry floating. But also, I would say that these conditional support should be really directed, or should be having clear objectives. When I say clear objectives, they should be linked to, let's say, digital transformation, or your environment footprint, or your take on social affairs. When I say social affairs, it's about your employees on your payroll, for instance. It should be very clear to the company that is getting such an aid, that they're also required to support one or two or all three of these objectives. Otherwise, just giving a support is not going to help.
Okay, so like you talked about distortion. So one of the distortions that Europe specifically is facing is the political aspect. So like we have seen the Brexit, there is bailout crisis within the European countries because of economic crisis, there is migration, and now pandemic. So like you are based in Brussels. So have you ever felt that because of more open European Union policies of transportation, there is over reliance, and such kind of distorting activities like Brexit can actually break that over reliance and push transport sector into crisis?
I have to say that the EU single market as such is a strength and also a weakness. Okay, so I'm not sure if it is over reliance, but the fact that the whole EU structure has been built upon is on the fact that the single market is going to break down those barriers, and there is more efficiency, and of course, all those principles of free movement of goods, people, and services. Okay, so having all those principles, I think they are very good principles. And if I have to relate it to India as well, I would say that we are pretty much in the same boat, where we have different states, and we are also trying to converge some of our strengths there. So COVID, Brexit, the migration issue, of course, had shown the weaknesses once again of what this EU single market has brought together over the years, or at least a failure in terms of the single market workings. But having said that, I still believe that, again, the strength is the fact that there is this collective thinking that the single market is still a boon, and they should strive towards better enforcement and interpretation of laws. And to that, I would say that what is the impact on transport? Of course, all these issues have a downside on the transport sector, because your connecting of people and connecting of goods will become, will have hurdles. If you talk about Brexit, the day that UK, I mean, it's already a fact that UK is going to leave EU. But again, once there is, let's say, there is no trade agreement with the UK, then we have a much bigger issue here, because the movement of people and goods and services will all be again having a lot of issues like hurdles. And what it means to transport sector specifically is there'll be a raise in cost to the business, because of course they have to comply with different rules, because until today or until now, it has been the case that they have made use of the single market principle, where there were no barriers. And similarly, you will have various kinds of administrative burdens or regulatory burdens, let's say, that will be popping up. And then, of course, the whole interpretation of all the laws and rules would also become another dimension, which will create some kind of unclarity and uncertainty, which is never good to the business. So my point is, yes, there is, some imbalances, or at least the failures in the single market is very visible. But on the other hand, it is the strength of the EU, and I believe that the EU will remain focused on bridging those gaps in order to make the single market more efficient. Because there is also a lot of learning that is coming out of each and every episode, like Brexit, COVID especially, and the migrant issues that has been taking place in the last couple of 1 to 2 years. And then specifically, each of the sectors, of course, is being impacted. But again, the fact that you focus on some of these strengths, I think we'll also try to see how we can reduce the barriers or the regulatory barriers for the sector as well.
Tamzid sir, one very much highlight of this entire conversation has been the impact of Corona on the transport sector. I remember having a discussion with you on the bailout package which the aviation sector requires in India and elsewhere. So, I just want to take an update from you. Has there been any progress on it? And in general, what are your opinion or suggestions on the way out for transport sector from Corona?
So no, the government has, as of now, said that there won't be any bailout package for the aviation industry. And there's one more important thing which we need to understand. In India, aviation or transport is a very important industry. That is, nobody is denying the fact. But before that thing, we have much more important other industries. For example, for the government, saving agriculture or saving a steel industry is the prime importance, is the basic requirement. So, it is also fallacy on our part to expect that the government is going to bail out or bring a sector-specific measure for the aviation sector. So they have brought measures, but those measures are totally in general. They are not aimed at the sector in specific. So yeah, as of now, there has been no specific update for the aviation industry, and it won't be, because the government has clarified that, and which makes sense in the Indian context also. For India, we are still primarily an agriculture country. So the government wants to invest mostly on that part, the steel part, and other heavy industries. So I don't see any kind of specific aviation or any specific sector-specific bailout coming for this industry in the near time.
I think just to add that, Pranav, I would say that yes, indeed, COVID had a huge impact on the transport sector, but also on the general economy of every country in the world. And almost every country in the world has sought for financial support, irrespective of which sector you're coming from. But I would say that transport specifically has been hit very badly. I understand what Tamzid said, and of course, it's also happening across, in the other continents, where the focus is not primarily transport, but on other sectors. Okay. But I think what really makes transport, or at least the reason why transport should be supported, is because it is that connecting factor. Transport supports agriculture. I was telling in my introduction that transport is not just bringing people from one place to another. There is a global trade that relies on transport. There is your whole let's say if we take, Make in India program, all those goods that are manufactured in India should be going out, or at least should be, going from point A to point B. Your pharmaceutical sector, especially during COVID times, you have seen that the role of cargo sector, that has been pretty evident, where it has played a vital role in bringing food or pharma medical to the people. Okay, so it has an important role to play, and it's a connecting factor with all the other sectors, whether it's agriculture, pharma, tourism, or manufacturing sector. So therefore, I believe, and this is where I would say that there should be some kind of a support mechanism given to the transport sector, because the point is that if the transport sector, once the economy, once COVID is gone and once the economy revives, and most of these players that we are talking about, irrespective of which mode of transport, they're all going to go bankrupt. What is what's it left then? So you have a lot of goods in your warehouses. You have a lot of produce, of agricultural produce. What are you going to do with them when you don't have your freight forwarders? You don't have your whole ecosystem of transport. So having said that, again, I go back to that point which you also said earlier on conditional support. I think you should definitely think of what kind of support mechanism should be given to transport sector, and there should be given in terms of loans, if I may say that as well, and there should be a lot of conditions. And one last point is the support system that is being devised should only go to healthy companies pre-COVID, because if the money is going to the wrong companies, or when I say wrong companies, like that are already financially not well off, then then you're putting your money in the wrong bucket. Okay, and one last point I would say is, at the end of the day, why are we doing all this? What is it that the transport sector, or why is it that the transport sector is seeking for such kind of a support? It is because at the end of the day, consumers need to benefit out of all this. Okay, and if there are few players in the market left, then consumers, you already saw that, or at least the government of India has already regulated the tariffs. Okay, saying that ticket prices cannot go beyond a certain threshold based on the kilometers. But imagine post-COVID, once all these restrictions are lifted, but then you have only two players to deal with it. Of course, whatever it's going to be like, it's going to be more like a monopoly. So I'm just trying to say, or at least trying to give you some points as to why this transport sector should be supported. But again, there's a lot of general support mechanisms that have been driven by the government in the past months, but it's definitely not sufficient.
Just to add one point, sir, I will just add one caveat here to your point. Transport sector, you're correct, it requires government intervention, government support, but that is not the case in India. Because, for example, transport has three main, I must say, characteristics: air, rail, and road. Now, rail transport in India is fully government owned. It's a fully public sector unit. Road transport also, maximum, the 90% of road transport is owned by state transport corporations. So the left, or I must say, the unlucky lot is the aviation sector, along with Air India. So I believe when we say transport sector in India, transport sector per se does not require a lot of, I must say, support in that regard, because railways are publicly owned. They are government of India body. The road services mostly, I mean, say 90% in India are covered by the state transport corporations. They are government owned. They have the government money with them. So the singled out version is aviation only. And that is the reason I believe the government of India decided, or has, I must say, is inclined in not supporting the aviation sector. Because they feel, okay, we have the railways, which is owned by us. The road transport is owned by the state governments. And that is where we are left with.
Yeah. And it's an excellent point, Tamjeed, where you bring in the differentiation between the public and the private transport sectors, or at least currently in place. And I agree with you completely that currently, at least that's the thinking, not only in India, but all across the world, whether here in Europe and the member states or anywhere else as well. So, but again, my point is that whatever, it all depends, whatever support mechanism that private sector or private operators are seeking. So if you talk about the road sector, you have the buses and the coaches and even the taxi, okay, that is in the urban landscape. Okay, when we talk about air aviation, it's a clear example. Okay, so whoever is in the private sector, my point is that they should be given that support, because we need these players. There is a huge, otherwise there would be a huge demand, and then there is no supply once the economy revives. So I'm thankful to you for bringing that point.
And Tanzim sir, I would like to take your point on this particular aspect, which is the privatization which is happening in India. So for example, even in railways, government is actually looking towards privatization, and they have brought in 100% FDI in road and aviation already. But we do not see any impetus on the policy side. So like for example, if we take the logistic policy, which was supposed to come out in this union budget of 2020, has not been released actually till now, and no policy guidelines has been updated even on the urban transport sector. The only urban transport policy that we have actually belongs to 2012. But then we have dreams of government on making India a $5 trillion economy soon, or ease of doing business, such kind of projects. So do you think India is even ready for such heavy privatization?
If I may begin on this point, I was talking to an officer of the Ministry of Railways a few days back, and the same point came up. And I totally agree with you that the government want to privatize many things. But remember one thing, railways will not be an easy task for any government. Because I don't know about many other countries, but in India, railways have a sentimental value. Right? And railways have been the chariot of common man. Therefore, even if you see today, the government of India, the Minister of Railways has set on the record in the parliament that we do not aim to privatize the railways. We only want to permit 100 trains which can be operated by private parties. So my point here would be that yes, they want to privatize, but privatizing railway will not be a cakewalk, because it can be a political suicide for any government, because railways hold a very special position, and I must say they hold a very emotional attachment with the common people of India. And that is the only reason, if you talk to any policymaker, they say no government can openly say that we want to privatize railways. They will say we want to privatize Air India, we want to privatize the road sector, but no government will ever openly go and say that we want to privatize the Indian railways. And that is something which I believe we have to acknowledge, that why there is less impetus on the FDI, or I must say on the privatization side, on the railway side, because the government knows this, that if it happens, it can be a political suicide for them. So that's what only I would add here, and it's all back to Sagar, sir.
I agree on that to some extent. I think the emotional side and definitely the day-to-day, how to say, railways have been part and parcel of our life as well, the Indian life, let's say. So definitely there's an emotional connection there. But I have to say a couple of points here. One, any research and innovation needs funding. And the government, I suppose, is not in a position anymore to raise those funds. That is the first point. Second point is there is a huge supply and demand disparity happening. And what that means is also that, the government itself is not able to provide, or at least satisfy the needs of the common man that we are talking about here. So that's where they also see a need for private sector or private participants to step in. It's not just railway sector, but also we see that in the recent announcements on in the space sector as well, where the government also equally said that Space is of course recognized as a strategic sector, and it requires private participation is also really sought after. So, having said those 2 points, again, at the end of the day, the consumer preferences is what matters, or at least the consumer preferences have a way to also dictate which model is better. Okay, so I would say there, privatization in itself probably is not bad. But if you, as a government, is not going to do it today, tomorrow someone else might do it. And this is what has happened in the UK and many other parts of Europe, okay, in the past with the railway sector, where they went out and initially said, we are only going to give permit on few routes. And then, of course, once they saw the benefit and people are comfortable, of course, that's the next step. So I'm not saying that it's going to be step one, 100% privatization. That will never be the case, okay? So here is the thing. What is it that is required as a way forward? Now, the decision to privatize is already made. Okay. From a policy standpoint, what we need to ensure, or what the policy experts and what the government need to ensure, is that there is a level playing field and there are no barriers to access for new players. Okay. And then, of course, the third one is the rule of law. You have to make sure that there is a legal regime that will provide that clarity and certainty for private participants who are investing in that particular sector. Because why would they, first of all, invest? And then if you're talking about innovation and new technologies to be adopted or to be brought in order for them to be adopted, all these things could only happen when there is a clear regime in place. Okay, so those would be my key, way forward thinking, that our focus should be more on how do we ensure that private participants are also equally, provided that ammunition in order to ensure that also at the end of the day, we are again doing all this for consumers, for customers, that they are benefited in these efforts.
So thank you for pointing out so eloquently on such points. And personally, for me, it's such a transport policy as such is such a new field for me. But this conversation has made me learn new points so easily, and I'm hopeful that our listeners too have learned new things. So I think if you both don't have any new pointers to add, we can conclude this podcast for today.
I would add, Pranav, if you don't mind, I would also talk about sustainability, if that's a key thing, because I think I kind of brought about digitalization and sustainability, but I think the Indian government also, I saw recently that they are pushing a lot on electrification. Okay.
Yeah.
I believe that a move like that could probably have negative consequences because it's kind of abrupt. You have a lot of other fuel technologies available in the market. So I think the government should look beyond. It should look not only just electrification as a means for decarbonization, but should also allow other fuels. It should remain kind of technology neutral. Okay, even in terms of all these fuel technologies that are available in the market. And the alternative fuels should, of course, be the way forward, because we do not know to what extent all this electrification that we are talking about is even, reducing the CO2 emissions. Because you have to look at the whole process of how this electrification is being done. That is one thing. And maybe the other fuels, whether synthetic fuels or biofuels or whatever or even basically any other kind of fuels that are available, existing ones, probably are also more efficient in terms of helping the CO2 reduction. Having said that, what you should also keep in mind is that whatever this electrification is trying to do is going to only help the urban landscape. Okay, when we are talking about your last mile deliveries, we are talking about your mobility within the cities, is where this electrification could help. But when you talk about a point from from Delhi to Hyderabad, long truck, let's say, is not going to, electrification. There's even Tesla doesn't have a long haul electric truck, and even if it is the case, I'm not sure how how CO2 friendly it is going to be. So my point is that it should be technology neutral, and alternative fuels should be the way forward, and this is how the government should be thinking as well, in terms of its decarbonization efforts.
So like just asking you further question on it, like when we were talking about conditional packages to the transport industry, you were talking about innovation as one of the essential factor which will revive transport industry from corona impact. So will electrification and bringing of such alternative fuels be part of such innovations which can revive transport industry?
Absolutely, absolutely. And again, that should be the way forward, rather than the policy being pushed because of some vested interest. That should not be the case. If your goal is to be innovative, and also clearly able to meet your objectives, and the objective is to reduce CO2 carbon footprint from the transport sector in general. Okay. If those are the objectives, then definitely you need to focus on this, by providing an open market for everyone to thrive, rather than saying only electrification. And added to that, Pranav, it's also electrification is one thing, but then the whole infrastructure behind it, whether it's the charging infrastructure, your urban landscape, especially in India, as you know, in the big cities, it's kind of 2 to 5 year planning. I don't think it has gone beyond that. So you need to have a vision where you also need to see how these electrification, of course, you're pushing on one hand, but on the other hand, how this could be supported, okay, which is not the case today. So again, this is where your policy thinking comes in, and you have to discuss with the business and with the government and with your engineer, the planning, urban planners, in order to see how that's going to all sink in together in order to benefit of the electrification efforts that that the policy is being currently pushed.
Distribution of resources to enable its outreach to both urban and rural sector remains very essential part of this electrical vehicle policy, which is going to be part and parcel of future transport sector. So I think on that note we can end this podcast now.
Yes, I would only add that the way forward is that communication and collaboration, and especially with the Indian government, I would say that there needs to be more and more consultations with the business, and also I would say not just within the sector or within the modes of transport, but also cross-sectoral, whether it's agriculture or pharma or logistics. I think the transport sector should really be involved in order to build that holistic approach, and to also see that transport is seen as an asset rather than as a problem by the government. And to that extent, you need, of course, your infrastructure, which you also pointed out earlier.
I think transport policy has come out as a field which includes so many multidisciplinary approach, so many different fields within itself, from aviation to electrical vehicles, and I think it's in middle of some challenges, but we are hopeful for better times. On that note, we can end this conversation. Really pleased to have you both for this conversation. I'm really thankful to our editors at IGLPP who helped us in research on this particular field, and thanks to the listeners for joining us. We'll be seeing you next week. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the podcast. Do not forget to check our website for more updates and legal articles. You can follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. See you next time.